My son-in-law sneered right in the courtroom. Finally, your ranch and your truck belong to me, you worthless old man. My daughter laughed and clapped like she'd already cashed the $2.3 million check. They were sure the old man was finished. The property was theirs. I just sat there, silently smiling. Then the judge looked up and said one sentence, and the blood drained from their faces in seconds. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Orrin Fletcher. I'm 67 years old, and I live on an 847-acre ranch outside Fredericksburg, Texas. Spent 35 years as a notary public before retiring 5 years back. People say I'm methodical, maybe a bit too quiet for my own good, but I've learned that watching and listening beats talking every time. Turns out that skill would save everything I've ever built. The ranch sits on Ranch Road 2721, about 15 miles from town. It's hill country land, rolling terrain, live oaks, good grazing. I bought it piece by piece over 40 years, building it from nothing into something worth $2.3 million. Not that the number matters much when you're living here. What matters is the sunrise over the east pasture, the sound of cattle settling in for the night, and the peace that comes from owning something nobody can take from you. At least, that's what I thought. My daughter Kimberly moved back to the ranch 5 years ago with her husband Derek Rodriguez. She'd always been my only child, bright and full of life. When she was young, she'd follow me around the property, asking 1,000 questions about every fence post and water line. Daddy, why do the cows do that? Daddy, can I help fix the truck? That little girl grew into a smart woman who went to college in Austin, got her business degree, seemed to have the world figured out. Then she met Derek at some real estate networking event. He was 32 at the time, working for a property management company. Smooth talker, expensive haircut, the kind of smile that looks practiced in a mirror. When Kimberly first brought him to the ranch, he played the part perfectly, calling me sir, complimenting my truck collection, asking respectful questions about ranch operations. I wanted to like him. I really did. For Kimberly's sake, I tried. They married quick, maybe too quick. 6 months after meeting, they had a small ceremony in Fredericksburg. I paid for most of it, which didn't bother me. That's what fathers do. What bothered me was the way Derek's eyes would scan the property during the reception, like he was already doing calculations. But I pushed that feeling down. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just another old man who thought nobody was good enough for his daughter. The first year they lived on the ranch, things seemed manageable. Derek worked remotely and Kimberly helped with the bookkeeping. They stayed in the guest house, a comfortable 2-bedroom place about 200 yards from the main house. Derek would occasionally offer to help with ranch work, though he never lasted more than an hour before finding some excuse to head back inside. Not really built for this kind of labor, he'd say with that practiced laugh. The changes came gradually, like water wearing down stone. Small things at first. Derek stopped saying sir, started calling me old man, in what he claimed was a joking tone, but his eyes never smiled when he said it. Kimberly began picking up his speech patterns, his attitude. When I'd mentioned something that needed fixing around the ranch, she'd sigh and say, Dad, maybe it's time to hire that out. You're not getting any younger. I'm 67, not 97. I can still work a full day when needed. But they'd started this narrative that I was declining, failing, becoming a burden. Derek would make comments at dinner about managing the property more efficiently and modernizing operations. What he meant was taking control. What he wanted was ownership. By the 3rd year, the pretense had worn completely thin. Derek stopped helping with anything. He'd spend his days on the phone or at his laptop, barely acknowledging my presence. Kimberly transformed from my daughter into his echo chamber. When I'd walk into a room, their conversations would stop abruptly. They'd exchange glances, the kind that said, not in front of him. I started noticing other things. Derek taking photos of the property on his phone, making notes in a leather portfolio during meals, having hushed conversations with someone named Marcus about development potential and commercial zoning possibilities. Once, I walked past the guest house window and saw him with maps spread across the table, calculator in hand, measuring something on what looked like a survey of my land. This past March, everything came to a head. It was a Tuesday morning, unseasonably warm. I was in the barn working on my 1959 Chevrolet Apache, my favorite truck in my small collection. Restoring old vehicles is my meditation, the one hobby that keeps me sane. I had the hood up, checking the carburetor I'd rebuilt the previous week, when Derek walked in. No greeting, no small talk, just straight to business. "We need to talk about the ranch," he said, leaning against my workbench like he owned the place. Already I didn't like his tone. "What about it?" "You're not managing it properly anymore. The operation's losing money, you're falling behind on maintenance, and honestly, you're too old to keep handling everything yourself." He said it like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed. "It's time to officially transfer management to me. I've been talking to some people, and I can turn this place profitable again." I set down my wrench slowly, giving myself time to think. The ranch isn't losing money. We cleared $83,000 last year after expenses. That's nothing for a property this size. With proper development. "Development?" I cut him off. "This is a working ranch, Derek. It's not a development opportunity." His jaw tightened. That polite mask he used to wear was long gone. "You're being stubborn and stupid. I'm offering to help you before you run everything into the ground." "I don't recall asking for your help." He pushed off the workbench, stepping closer. Kimberly appeared in the barn doorway. She must have been waiting nearby. Her presence there, supporting him, felt like a knife between my ribs. "Dad," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Derek's right. You're struggling. We've noticed things. You forget conversations, you repeat yourself. You're making poor financial decisions. We're worried about you." "Worried about me?" "Right?" They were worried about their inheritance timeline. "I appreciate your concern," I said, keeping my voice level, "but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own property." Derek's face hardened. "Then we'll do this the hard way. We're not asking any more, old man. Sign management over to me, or we'll take other steps to ensure you don't destroy what should be Kimberly's legacy." The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Kimberly didn't object, didn't defend me, didn't even look uncomfortable. She just stood there, arms crossed, nodding along with her husband's ultimatum. "Get out of my barn," I said quietly. Derek smirked. "We live here, remember? This is our home too, and soon it'll be officially ours. Think about that while you're playing with your little trucks, old man. We're going another route now." They left me standing there, wrench in hand, staring at the empty doorway. In that moment, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about concern or proper management. This was a takeover, plain and simple. My daughter and her husband were trying to steal my life's work while I was still breathing. I looked down at my hands, steady, capable, strong despite what they claimed. Then I looked at the legal documents pinned to my workshop board, reminders from my 35 years as a notary. I knew the law, I knew property rights, I knew how to protect assets. They wanted to play games with an old man? Fine. They'd just started a war with someone who'd spent his entire career understanding exactly how legal documents work and how to make them bulletproof. 2 weeks passed like cold molasses. I went about my usual routine, feeding cattle, maintaining equipment, working on my trucks. But everything had changed. The ranch didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory, where I had to watch every word, every action. Derek and Kimberly had stopped pretending entirely. They'd have loud conversations in the guest house about accelerating the timeline and not waiting any longer. When I'd see them around the property, Derek would smirk at me like he knew something I didn't. Kimberly avoided eye contact altogether. The call came on a Thursday morning. I was having coffee on the porch when my phone rang. Sharon Mills, branch manager at Hill Country Bank. I'd known her for 20 years. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Orrin, I need you to come down to the bank today. Something's come up with your accounts that requires your immediate attention." "What kind of something?" A pause. "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you be here within the hour?" 30 minutes later, I sat across from Sharon in her office. She slid a document across her desk, her expression tight. "Someone attempted to establish a power of attorney on your accounts yesterday. The signature looked off to me, so I wanted to verify with you directly before processing." I picked up the document. My name was there, supposedly authorizing Derek Rodriguez to have full financial control over all my accounts. The signature was a decent forgery. Someone had studied my hand, but it wasn't mine. I never signed this, I said. Sharon nodded grimly. I suspected... Orrin, there's more. Derek came in personally to present this. He also inquired about your account balances, asked about liquidating certain assets, and wanted information on your mortgage status. When I told him I couldn't discuss your private financial information without proper authorization, he became quite insistent. Said you'd been having problems, and that he was handling your affairs now. My hands tightened on the paper. What else? He mentioned something about you having memory issues, not being competent to manage your own finances anymore. He seemed very prepared, Orrin. He had talking points ready, almost like he'd rehearsed them. I left the bank with a copy of the forged document and a sick feeling in my stomach. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a coordinated attack. Derek was building a narrative about my incompetence, creating a paper trail to support it. I drove back toward the ranch, but instead of turning onto my property, I kept going into town. I needed to think, needed space away from them. I found myself at Porky's BBQ, a little joint on Main Street where I'd eaten lunch for years. Sat in a corner booth with pulled pork I couldn't taste, my mind spinning. A memory surfaced unbidden. Kimberly at 8 years old, crying because she'd fallen off her bike and scraped her knee. I'd carried her into the house, cleaned the wound, put on a Band-Aid with cartoon characters. She'd looked up at me with those big eyes and said, "You always fix everything, Daddy? You're magic." I'd laughed and kissed her forehead. "Not magic, baby girl. Just your dad, who loves you." When had I stopped being magic? When had I become the obstacle? Another memory, Kimberly's high school graduation. She'd walked across that stage, diploma in hand, and found me in the crowd, pointed right at me and mouthed, "I love you, Dad." I'd been so proud I'd cried, not caring who saw. That was my daughter. Smart, kind, grateful for every opportunity I'd given her. The woman living in my guest house wasn't that girl anymore, or maybe she was still in there somewhere, buried under Derek's influence and her own greed. I didn't know which truth hurt worse. I paid for lunch I hadn't eaten and walked back to my truck. As I reached for the door handle, I noticed it. A small business card tucked under the wiper blade. Gerald Martinez, attorney at law, estate planning and property rights. His office was 3 blocks away. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Sharon at the bank had made a phone call after I left. Small towns work like that. People look out for each other. I stared at the card for a long moment, then looked up at my reflection in the truck's window. The old man looking back at me had tired eyes and slumped shoulders. No. I straightened up. That's not who I was. I'd built this ranch from nothing, raised a daughter alone after my wife passed, spent 35 years helping people protect their assets and understand their legal rights. Derek thought I was some confused old man easy to manipulate. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating people. I walked to Martinez's office and spent 2 hours laying out everything, the forged power of attorney, Derek's threats, the pattern of behavior over 5 years. Martinez listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he sat back and studied me. "You know what he's building toward, right? He's going to petition the court to declare you incompetent. Get himself appointed as your guardian with control over all your assets. I've seen it before, usually with legitimate cases where someone actually needs help. But sometimes," he tapped his pen against the desk, "sometimes it's just theft wearing a legal costume. Can he succeed? If he presents the right evidence to the right judge? Maybe. The fact that he forged documents shows he's willing to commit fraud, which actually works in your favor if we can prove it. But Orrin, you need to understand, this is going to get ugly. Your daughter's involved. She'll likely have to testify against you to support his claim. She already has chosen his side." Martinez nodded slowly. "Then we need to move fast and smart. First thing, stop any conversations with them that aren't witnessed or recorded. Texas is a one-party consent state for recordings. If you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without telling them." I left his office with a small digital recorder in my pocket and a plan forming in my mind. Over the next few days, I'd document everything, every dismissive comment, every attempt to control or manipulate, every piece of their scheme. That evening I sat in my workshop with the Apache, but I wasn't working on the engine. I was thinking about chess. My daddy taught me to play when I was young, and he'd always said the same thing. Son, amateurs react to the last move. Masters plan 5 moves ahead. Derek thought he was playing chess. He'd made his moves, forged documents, built his narrative. But he was playing against someone who'd spent a lifetime understanding how legal protections worked, who knew every document that mattered, every loophole that existed. I pulled out my notebook and started writing. Not just defensive moves, offensive ones. Ways to protect what was mine so thoroughly that even if Derek won his court case, he'd win nothing. Ways to document his fraud so completely that he'd face consequences beyond just losing. Ways to make sure that when this was over, justice would be served cold and absolute. They thought I was a confused old man. They'd discover they'd started a war with someone who knew exactly what he was doing and had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Derek and Kimberly came to the main house for breakfast. Unusual for them. Derek sat at my kitchen table like he owned it, coffee in hand, that smirk on his face. "We've been thinking," he said, "about what we discussed in the barn. Maybe we were too harsh. Maybe we can work something out that makes everyone happy." I smiled blandly, the recorder running in my shirt pocket. "I'm listening." Let them talk. Let them reveal their plans. I'd learned long ago that the best way to catch someone in a lie was to let them keep talking until they forgot what they'd said before. This was going to be a very interesting game. The performance began the next morning. I shuffled into the kitchen wearing my oldest robe, the one with the coffee stain on the sleeve that I'd normally never be caught wearing. Derek and Kimberly were already there, helping themselves to breakfast like they owned the place, which I suppose they thought they soon would. "Morning," I mumbled, making a show of looking around confused. Did I already have coffee? Can't remember." Kimberly exchanged a quick glance with Derek. He bit back a smile. "No, Dad. You just woke up." "Oh, right." I poured myself a cup, then stood there, staring at it like I'd forgotten why I'd poured it. The recorder in my robe pocket was running. Let them think they were winning. Over the next few days, I became a masterclass in playing the confused old man. I'd ask Derek the same question twice in an hour. I'd walk into rooms and forget why I'd gone there. Once, I stood in the barn for 5 minutes, looking at my Apache like I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do with it. Derek watched from the doorway, practically vibrating with satisfaction. "You okay there, old man?" he called out, voice dripping with false concern. "Just trying to remember what I was working on." I scratched my head, playing it perfectly. "Maybe it's time to give up the hobby. Dangerous for someone in your condition to be working with tools." In your condition. I filed that phrase away with all the others. Every word was evidence. Every condescending comment, another nail in his coffin. But he didn't know that. He thought he was watching me decline. In reality, he was watching me build a case. What fascinated me most was how quickly Derek dropped any pretense once he thought I was failing. The mask came completely off. He'd walk through the main house like he already owned it, measuring walls with his eyes, making comments about updating this dump and finally modernizing the place. Once I caught him in my office going through my file cabinet. "Just looking for some documents you mentioned," he said smoothly when I walked in. "You told me they were in here." I hadn't told him any such thing, and we both knew it. But I played along. Did I? Can't remember. Getting forgetful, I guess. "Very forgetful," he agreed, not even bothering to hide his triumph. Kimberly was worse in some ways. At least Derek was openly malicious. You knew where you stood with him. But my daughter had perfected this sad, martyred expression, like she was sacrificing so much to care for her declining father. She'd sigh heavily when talking to him about me, just loud enough for me to overhear. "I don't know how much longer we can handle this, Derek. He's getting worse every day. Yesterday he couldn't remember which pasture the cattle were in. What if he hurts himself?" She said it with such convincing worry that if I didn't know better, I might have believed she actually cared. But I'd seen her face when Derek talked about selling the ranch. I'd seen the way her eyes lit up at the mention of $2.3 million. This wasn't concern. This was greed, wearing a concerned daughter costume. I started timing my confused episodes for maximum effect. I'd leave cabinet doors open, forget to turn off lights, put the milk in the pantry instead of the fridge, though I'd move it back when they weren't looking. Every little thing reinforced their narrative that I was losing my grip. Meanwhile, I was having very different meetings in town. Gerald Martinez's office became my second home. We'd meet in the early mornings before Derek and Kimberly were awake, plotting out every detail of what he called my legal fortress. The centerpiece was a revocable living trust, a document that would transfer all my assets into a protected entity where I maintained full control during my lifetime. But Derek couldn't touch a single acre, even if he got himself declared my guardian. The beauty of this, Martinez explained, spreading documents across his desk, is that it's completely legal and almost impossible to challenge. You're the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. You lose nothing, but everything, the ranch, the trucks, the bank accounts, all of it, technically belongs to the trust, not to you personally. And if a court declares me incompetent, the trust survives. In fact, that's one of the main reasons people create them, to ensure their wishes are followed even if they become incapacitated. We'll name a successor trustee to take over management if needed, someone of your choosing. Not Derek, never Derek. We spent hours going through every detail. The ranch property, purchased in pieces over 40 years. My truck collection, each vehicle documented and appraised. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, even the mineral rights on the land. Everything had to be cataloged, valued, and transferred into the trust's name. The paperwork was extensive. Good thing I'd spent 35 years as a notary. I knew exactly what every document meant, every clause, every protection. Martinez would draft something, I'd review it, we'd refine it together. Nothing was left to chance. "What about after I'm gone?" I asked during one session. Martinez looked up from his notes. "You get to decide. Family, charity, whoever you want. The trust allows you to name beneficiaries who'll receive everything when you pass." I thought about Kimberly, about the little girl who used to hold my hand and call me magic. Then I thought about the woman who was testifying to her husband, about my supposed dementia, building a case to steal my life's work. "A charity," I said finally. "Animal rescue, maybe. Something that actually helps beings who can't help themselves." Martinez nodded slowly, understanding what I wasn't saying, that I was writing my daughter out of my life as thoroughly as she'd tried to write me out of my own story. But the trust was only part of the defense. I needed to know what Derek was planning, what evidence he was gathering, who he was talking to. That's where Raymond Cole came in. I found Cole through an ad in the Fredericksburg Standard, discreet investigation services, 20 years law enforcement experience. His office was a small room above a hardware store on Main Street. Cole himself was a solid man in his mid-40s, with observant eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent years waiting for criminals to make mistakes. "I need to know what my son-in-law is planning," I told him, laying out the situation. "He's trying to take my property, and I need to be ready." Cole listened without judgment, taking notes on a yellow pad. "You want surveillance? I want everything. Where he goes, who he meets with, what he's saying. If he's building a case against me, I need to know what's in it." "Legal surveillance only," Cole warned. "I don't plant bugs. I don't hack phones. I don't break laws. I follow, I photograph, I document what happens in public spaces. That work for you?" "That works perfectly." Cole started following Derek the next day. The reports came back like clockwork, detailed and damning. Derek met with a real estate developer named Marcus Chen at a coffee shop in Austin, sitting in a corner booth with property maps spread between them. Cole got photos of them examining survey documents, pointing at aerial shots of my ranch, clearly discussing development plans. 2 days later, Derek met with a different lawyer, not Martinez, someone from San Antonio. They talked for 90 minutes at a restaurant, Derek doing most of the talking, the lawyer taking extensive notes. Cole couldn't hear the conversation from where he was positioned, but he got clear photos of both of them, along with the lawyer's business card from the reception desk. Harold Simmons, elder law and guardianship. Elder law, guardianship. Derek wasn't even being subtle anymore. The most damning evidence came from a third meeting. Derek and Marcus Chen again, this time at Chen's office in Austin. Cole couldn't get inside, but he watched through the ground floor window as Derek signed what looked like a preliminary agreement. Money didn't change hands. That would come later, but the intent was clear. Derek was making deals to sell property he didn't own, counting on his court case to give him legal access. When Cole showed me the photographs, I felt my stomach turn. There was my ranch, my land that I'd built from nothing, marked up on those maps with proposed development plots. They were planning to carve it into pieces, sell it off to the highest bidders, destroy 40 years of work for a quick profit. How much do you think he's agreed to? I asked. Cole tapped one of the photos where Derek was shaking hands with Chen. Based on land values in hill country right now, if he's selling all 847 acres, probably talking $2.3 million, maybe more. And your son-in-law gets paid whether the ranch is worth saving or not. $2.3 million. For Derek and Kimberly, that was their retirement fund, their ticket to a life where they never had to work again. For me, it was the death of everything I'd built. Back at the ranch, Derek's confidence had reached nauseating levels. He'd started giving me orders, not even phrasing them as suggestions anymore. "Don't feed the cattle tomorrow morning," he told me one evening. "I've got someone coming to look at the herd." "Want them hungry so they're easier to move? Who's coming?" "Don't worry about it. Just stay out of the way, old man. Let me handle the business side of things now." I nodded meekly, playing my role. Inside, I was cataloging everything. The recorder caught it all, his tone, his words, his casual assumption of control over property that wasn't his. That night, I sat in my office after they'd gone back to the guest house. Martinez's trust documents were spread across my desk, ready to be signed and notarized. Cole's surveillance photos were in a folder, clear evidence of Derek's plans. Bank statements showing the attempted fraud sat beside them. Medical records from my recent checkup. Blood pressure normal, cognitive function tested and scored perfectly, added to the pile. I looked at all of it, this paper fortress I'd built around myself, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, something calmer, more purposeful. They'd wanted to play games with an old man who'd spent his life understanding legal documents. Fine. They'd just armed the one person who knew exactly how to use those documents as weapons. And that's when I understood how to repay them, not with violence or revenge in the traditional sense, but with the one thing I knew better than anyone, the law itself, turned into a blade so sharp they wouldn't see it coming until it had already cut through everything they'd planned. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a county sheriff's deputy who looked uncomfortable with his task. I'd known Bill Henderson for 15 years. He'd served papers on property disputes and estate cases back when I was still working as a notary. Now he was serving papers on me. "Sorry about this, Orrin," he muttered, handing me the envelope. "Just doing my job." "I know, Bill. No hard feelings." I waited until he left before opening it, though I already knew what would be inside. Derek Rodriguez versus Orrin Fletcher. Petition for determination of incapacity and appointment of guardian. The words were cold and legal, but their intent was clear. Derek was asking the court to declare me mentally incompetent and give him control over every aspect of my life and property. The petition itself was thick. Derek hadn't come unprepared. I sat at my kitchen table and read through it page by page, my coffee growing cold beside me. Each section was more infuriating than the last. Exhibit A, an affidavit from someone named Robert Walsh, claiming to be my neighbor. Walsh stated he'd witnessed me, wandering confused on the property and unable to recognize familiar landmarks. I'd never met Robert Walsh. We had 3 neighbors within 5 miles, and none of them were named Walsh. This testimony was completely fabricated. Exhibit B, a statement from Kimberly. My daughter's words, typed neatly on legal paper, describing a father who regularly forgets where he is, who has become increasingly paranoid and hostile, who refuses to acknowledge his declining condition. She wrote about incidents that never happened, conversations that never occurred. It was like reading fiction, except the character being destroyed was me. Exhibit C, medical records from a doctor I'd seen once 3 years ago for a routine physical. Someone had cherry-picked a single line about age-appropriate memory changes and blown it completely out of proportion, making it sound like I had diagnosed dementia. The doctor had literally written normal for age in the full report, but that part was conveniently left out. Exhibit D: financial documents supposedly showing erratic and irresponsible spending patterns. I looked closer. They'd taken my purchase of parts for the Apache restoration, legitimate expenses for my hobby, carefully budgeted, and presented them as evidence of poor judgment. A $3,200 payment to a classic auto parts supplier was described as unexplained large transactions suggesting confusion. The $5,800 I'd spent on new fencing for the south pasture was labeled unnecessary capital expenditure demonstrating decline in reasoning ability. It was brilliant, in a sick way. Take real information, strip away context, reframe everything to support a predetermined conclusion. If I didn't know the truth, if I was just a judge reading these documents cold, I might believe them too. The hearing date was set for 6 weeks out. That gave Derek time to build his case, and gave me time to build mine. The difference was I'd already started building months ago. I drove straight to Martinez's office, the petition in hand. He read through it carefully, his expression darkening with each page. "They went hard," he said finally. "This isn't some half-baked attempt. Derek hired competent counsel, they've fabricated evidence carefully, and they've structured the petition to look credible. Oren, I need you to understand. This is going to be a real fight. We can win, but only if we're absolutely prepared. What do we need?" Martinez started making a list. First, medical evaluations from multiple doctors. Not just one. I want 3 independent assessments, all showing you're completely competent. Cognitive tests, memory tests, the works. Second, we need to expose the fabricated testimony. This Robert Walsh doesn't exist. We prove that. Third, we need evidence of Derek's real motives. Cole's surveillance photos will help. And fourth, he paused, looking up at me, we need the trust finalized and documented before the hearing. Once it's in place and publicly recorded, Derek's entire case becomes pointless. Even if he wins guardianship, he won't get what he's really after. We spent the next 3 weeks in preparation mode. I'd never worked so hard in my life, not even during the busiest years building up the ranch. The medical evaluations came first. Martinez arranged appointments with 3 different doctors, a general practitioner, a neurologist, and a psychiatrist, who specialized in geriatric assessment. Each one put me through extensive testing, memory quizzes, problem-solving exercises, psychological evaluations. I drew clocks, repeated number sequences backward, answered questions about current events. The neurologist, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, was particularly thorough. She spent 2 hours with me, testing everything from basic recall to complex decision-making. At the end, she sat back and shook her head. "Mr. Fletcher, I don't know who told you that you're experiencing cognitive decline, but they're wrong. Your scores are in the 91st percentile for your age group. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning is sound, and you show no signs whatsoever of dementia or any other cognitive impairment." "Can you put that in writing?" "Already planned to. I'll have a full report to your attorney within 3 days. All 3 doctors came back with similar conclusions. According to medical professionals who actually examined me, rather than Derek's fabricated witnesses, I was perfectly competent to manage my own affairs. Next came the trust finalization. Martinez and I met with a notary, Diane Murphy, a colleague from my working days, to execute all the documents. Every property deed was transferred. Every bank account was retitled. The ranch, the trucks, the investments, everything moved into the Fletcher family revocable living trust, with me as grantor, trustee, and lifetime beneficiary. "After your death," Martinez explained as we signed the final documents, "everything goes to the beneficiary you've named. In this case, the Hill Country Animal Rescue Foundation. Derek gets nothing. Kimberly gets nothing. The property is protected from any claims they might make." We recorded the trust documents with the county clerk's office, making them part of the public record. Anyone searching property records would now see that Orrin Fletcher no longer personally owned the ranch. The trust did. It was completely legal, completely protected, and completely out of Derek's reach. Cole continued his surveillance, building a detailed timeline of Derek's activities. The photos were damning. Derek meeting with Chen, the developer, Derek at his lawyer's office, Derek photographing the ranch property without permission. But the most valuable evidence came from Derek's own mouth. I'd been recording every conversation we had, just as Martinez advised. The recordings captured Derek's threats, his condescending comments, his open discussion of plans to sell the property. In Texas, one-party consent means if you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally. Every word was admissible evidence, but I needed more. I needed Derek to reveal his full plan. So one evening, I invited him and Kimberly to the main house for dinner, playing the confused old man one more time. "I've been thinking," I said, struggling to cut my steak with exaggerated difficulty. "Maybe you two are right. Maybe I am getting too old for all this. Maybe it's time to make some changes." Derek's eyes lit up like I'd offered him a winning lottery ticket. "That's the most sensible thing you've said in months, old man. What kind of changes are you thinking?" "Well, the ranch is getting to be too much. The cattle, the maintenance, all of it. Maybe I should sign things over to you. Let you handle it." The recorder in my shirt pocket caught every word that followed. Derek leaned forward, barely containing his excitement, and laid out his entire plan. How he'd already contacted buyers for the cattle. How Chen was ready to start development immediately. How they'd subdivide the property into 20-acre parcels and sell them off for luxury home sites. "We could clear $2.3 million easy," he said, his voice animated. "Maybe more if we time the market right. You'd be taken care of, don't worry. We'd make sure you have enough for your needs." "How much would that be?" I asked quietly. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe $50,000? That should last you. And you'd move into a nice assisted living facility, somewhere with full-time care. $50,000 out of $2.3 million for the property I'd spent 40 years building, while they pocketed the rest and stuck me in a facility against my will." Kimberly nodded along with everything he said. My daughter, who I'd raised alone, who I'd put through college, who I'd given everything. She sat there nodding while her husband planned to strip me of my life's work and warehouse me somewhere I couldn't interfere. That sounds reasonable," I managed to say, though what I really wanted to do was throw them both out of my house right then. After they left, floating on clouds of anticipated victory, I sat in the dark kitchen and listened to the recording. Every word was clear, every plan laid out, every piece of evidence I needed to prove that this wasn't about concern for my well-being. It was about greed, pure and simple. Martinez listened to the recording the next morning, his face grim. "This is it. This is what we needed. Derek just confessed his entire scheme, and he has no idea you recorded it. Can we use it in court? Absolutely. It's legal, it's clear, and it proves motive. Combined with the medical evaluations showing you're competent, the trust documents showing you've already protected your assets, and Cole's surveillance photos showing Derek's secret meetings, we've got him cold." The next few days felt strange. I went about my normal routine, maintaining the confused old man act around Derek and Kimberly, while simultaneously putting the final pieces of my legal fortress in place. It was like living in two different worlds, one where I was a declining victim, and one where I was building something they'd never see coming. Derek grew more confident every day. He'd stopped even pretending to ask my opinion about things. He told me he'd scheduled the cattle sale, told me he'd hired someone to appraise the house, told me to start packing my personal items because we'll need to clear space for the new owners. Kimberly was already talking about what they'd do with the money. "California," she said, "a condo in San Diego. Maybe start a business." They planned it all out right in front of me like I was already gone, like I was just a ghost haunting my own property. The court date loomed closer. 1 week, 5 days, 3 days. Martinez and I met constantly, going over strategy, reviewing evidence, anticipating every argument Derek's lawyer might make. "They're going to paint you as a stubborn old man, too prideful to admit he needs help," Martinez predicted. "They'll use your resistance to their assistance as further proof of incompetence. We counter with the evidence of their real motives. We show the court that you're not resisting help, you're resisting theft." The night before the hearing, I stood on my porch, watching the sun set over the ranch. The land stretched out before me, 847 acres of hill country beauty. Every fence post, every pasture, every building, I knew them all. This was my life's work. This was what I'd built. Tomorrow, Derek would walk into that courthouse thinking he'd already won. He had his fake witnesses, his manipulated medical records, his fabricated evidence. He had Kimberly ready to testify against me. He probably thought the judge would take one look at me, a 67-year-old man, and side with the concerned younger family members trying to protect him. What Derek didn't know was that I'd spent months building a case so tight, so comprehensive, that his entire scheme would collapse the moment we presented it. He'd brought a knife to a gunfight, and he didn't even know it yet. I thought about the recordings in my pocket, the medical reports in Martinez's briefcase, the trust documents in the county clerk's office, Cole's surveillance photos documenting every secret meeting. I thought about 35 years of understanding exactly how the law works, how documents are challenged, and how to make protection truly unbreakable. Derek wanted to play legal games with me. Tomorrow he'd learn why that was the worst mistake of his life. The morning of the hearing arrived with unseasonable heat. I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal one I'd worn to legal proceedings back when I was still working. Martinez had suggested I look professional, capable, nothing like the confused old man Derek had been describing in his petition. We met at his office an hour before we were due at the courthouse. The conference table was covered with folders, each one labeled and organized with military precision. Medical reports, bank statements, surveillance photos, audio recordings, the trust documents, everything we needed to dismantle Derek's case piece by piece. "Remember," Martinez said, going over the strategy one final time, "we let them present their case first. Let them commit to their lies. Let Derek get confident. Then we systematically destroy every claim they've made. And the trust documents? That's our nuclear option. We hold it back until the end. Let Derek think he's won. Let him celebrate. Then we show the judge that even if he somehow succeeds in getting guardianship, he gets absolutely nothing. The ranch, the trucks, the money, all of it is already protected in a trust he can't touch." I nodded, feeling the weight of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about winning a legal case. This was about exposing Derek for what he truly was, a predator who'd tried to steal from the one person who'd welcomed him into their home. Martinez pulled out 3 thick manila envelopes. "These are our exhibits. Exhibit 1, medical evaluations from Dr. Hendricks, Dr. Patterson and Dr. Yates. All 3 independently confirmed you're cognitively sound. Exhibit 2, bank testimony and forged documents showing Derek's attempted fraud. Exhibit 3, Cole's surveillance report with photographs and timeline of Derek's meetings with Marcus Chen." He paused, then picked up a smaller envelope. "And this is Exhibit 4, the audio recordings of Derek laying out his entire plan to sell the ranch, keep most of the money, and warehouse you in assisted living. This one is particularly damaging because it proves motive. This isn't about concern, it's about greed." Will the judge listen to all of it? She'll have to. Derek opened this door when he filed his petition. We're entitled to present evidence that his motivations aren't what he claims. And Judge Barbara Thornton, Martinez smiled slightly. She's known for being thorough and having zero tolerance for courtroom manipulation. If Derek's lawyer tries any tricks, she'll shut them down hard. We arrived at the Gillespie County Courthouse 30 minutes early. The building was an old limestone structure in the center of Fredericksburg, the kind of place that had seen generations of hill country disputes resolve. Martinez and I took seats on a bench outside the courtroom, reviewing our materials one last time. Derek and Kimberly arrived 15 minutes later, and the sight of them made my stomach turn. Derek wore an expensive suit, probably $2,000, maybe more, and carried himself like he'd already won. His lawyer, Harold Simmons, walked beside him with a leather briefcase, looking smug and professional. Kimberly wore a dark dress that probably cost as much as Derek's suit. She'd done her makeup to look tired, worried, like a devoted daughter bearing a heavy burden. They saw me sitting there, and Derek actually smirked. He leaned over to Kimberly and said something that made her laugh, not loud enough for me to hear the words, but loud enough for me to hear the mockery in the sound. I kept my expression neutral. Let them laugh. Let them think this was already decided. The harder the fall would be. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff called us into the courtroom. Judge Thornton was already seated at the bench, a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked over the assembled parties with the expression of someone who'd seen every variation of family drama and wasn't impressed by any of it. This is a hearing on the petition filed by Derek Rodriguez, requesting determination of incapacity for Orrin Fletcher, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. Mr. Simmons, you filed the petition. Present your case. Simmons stood, smoothing his tie. Thank you, Your Honor. We're here today because of a difficult but necessary situation. Mr. Fletcher, whom we all respect, is experiencing significant cognitive decline. His family has watched with growing concern as he's become confused, forgetful, and unable to manage his affairs. This petition isn't about taking anything from Mr. Fletcher. It's about protecting him from himself. He made it sound so reasonable, so caring. If I didn't know the truth, I might have been convinced. Simmons called his first witness, the mysterious Robert Walsh, who supposedly lived near my ranch. Walsh took the stand looking nervous, which made sense considering he was about to commit perjury. He testified about seeing me wandering the property looking lost and talking to myself in an agitated manner. According to Walsh, I'd become a danger to myself. Martinez stood during cross-examination, and I watched his calm demolition of Walsh's testimony. Mr. Walsh, you testified you live near Mr. Fletcher's ranch, on Ranch Road, 2721. What's your address? Walsh hesitated. 1847 Ranch Road, 2721. Interesting, because according to county property records, that address doesn't exist. In fact, there are only 3 residential properties within 5 miles of Mr. Fletcher's ranch, and none of them are owned by anyone named Robert Walsh. Martinez held up a document. This is a county assessor's map. Would you like to point out where your property is located? Walsh's face went red. He stammered something about being mistaken about the exact address, but the damage was done. Even Judge Thornton was looking at him with obvious skepticism. 2 more witnesses followed, friends of Derek who claimed they'd witnessed my decline. Martinez dismantled each one with the same methodical precision, revealing inconsistencies and impossibilities in their stories. One claimed to have visited me at the ranch on a specific date. Martinez produced my calendar showing I'd been in San Antonio that entire week. Another described my kitchen layout incorrectly, proving she'd never actually been inside my house. Then came Kimberly's turn. My daughter took the stand, and I had to force myself to watch. She painted a picture of a declining father, mixing real memories with complete fabrications. She described incidents that never happened, conversations that never occurred. She cried on cue, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. He's not the man he used to be, she said, her voice breaking. Sometimes he doesn't recognize me. Sometimes he forgets where he is. I'm terrified he'll hurt himself. This isn't about the property, Your Honor. This is about making sure my father is safe and cared for. Martinez didn't cross-examine her aggressively. That would look bad, attacking a concerned daughter. Instead, he asked simple, factual questions that revealed contradictions in her timeline and exposed exaggerations in her claims. By the end, even Kimberly looked uncertain, her confidence shaken. Simmons presented the medical records, the cherry-picked ones, and the financial documents showing my erratic spending. He made his closing argument about the need to protect elderly citizens from their own poor judgment, about family responsibility, about doing the difficult but necessary thing. Your Honor, he concluded, the evidence clearly shows that Mr. Fletcher requires assistance managing his affairs. Mr. Rodriguez, as his son-in-law and a member of the family living on the property, is the logical choice to serve as guardian. This isn't about taking anything away. It's about ensuring Mr. Fletcher's well-being and protecting assets for the family's future. Derek was practically glowing. He kept glancing at me with that same smirk, like he was imagining me being escorted off my own property while he took possession. Kimberly sat beside him, looking relieved, like the hard part was over. Judge Thornton made some notes, then looked up. Mr. Martinez, I assume you have a response to this petition? Martinez stood. Yes, Your Honor. Quite a comprehensive response, actually. The bailiff handed Martinez's exhibits to the judge. She began reviewing them, and I watched her expression change as she read through the medical evaluations, saw the surveillance photos, examined the bank's documentation of the forged power of attorney. "Your Honor," Martinez said, "what we have here isn't a concerned family trying to protect an elderly man. What we have is attempted theft dressed up as guardianship, and I can prove it." Derek's smirk faltered, just slightly, just enough for me to notice, and that's when I knew. Martinez was about to destroy everything they'd built. The courtroom felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Derek still looked confident, but I caught him exchanging a quick glance with Simmons. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Martinez approached the bench and handed Judge Thornton a thick folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit 1. Independent medical evaluations from 3 board-certified physicians, all conducted within the past month. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a neurologist. Dr. Michael Patterson, a geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Sarah Yates, a general practitioner. Each doctor examined Mr. Fletcher independently and administered comprehensive cognitive assessments." Judge Thornton opened the folder and began reading. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper. I watched her face carefully, saw her eyebrows raise slightly as she reviewed the results. "According to these evaluations," Martinez continued, "Mr. Fletcher scored in the 90th percentile for his age group on cognitive function tests. His memory is excellent, his reasoning is sound, and he shows absolutely no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other cognitive impairment. In fact, Dr. Hendricks notes in her report that Mr. Fletcher's mental acuity is exceptional for someone of any age." Derek shifted in his seat. The smirk was gone now, replaced by something tighter around his mouth. Kimberly's hand went to her throat, fingers touching her necklace nervously. "But perhaps most importantly," Martinez said, pulling out another document, "we have testimony from Sharon Mills, branch manager at Hill Country Bank. Ms. Mills will testify that 3 weeks ago, Mr. Rodriguez attempted to present a power of attorney document supposedly signed by Mr. Fletcher, granting Mr. Rodriguez complete control over Mr. Fletcher's finances." He held up the forged document. Ms. Mills, having known Mr. Fletcher for 20 years, recognized immediately that this signature was not his. She contacted Mr. Fletcher for verification. He confirmed he had never signed such a document. "Your Honor, this is attempted fraud. Mr. Rodriguez tried to forge legal documents to gain unauthorized access to Mr. Fletcher's accounts." The color drained from Derek's face. Not slowly. It happened fast, like someone had pulled a plug. His skin went from confident tan to a grayish pale that made him look sick. Simmons was whispering urgently in his ear, but Derek just sat there, frozen. Martinez wasn't done. "Exhibit 3, Your Honor, a comprehensive surveillance report from Raymond Cole, a licensed private investigator with 20 years of law enforcement experience. Mr. Cole documented Mr. Rodriguez's activities over the past 6 weeks. He spread photographs across a presentation board, Derek meeting with Marcus Chen, Derek at his lawyer's office, Derek examining maps of my property. Each photo was dated and time-stamped, creating an undeniable timeline. These photographs show Mr. Rodriguez meeting with a real estate developer named Marcus Chen. They met 4 times over 3 weeks. In these meetings, visible through the office window, they discussed selling Mr. Fletcher's 847-acre ranch for approximately $2.3 million and subdividing it for residential development. Martinez paused, letting that sink in. "Your Honor, Mr. Rodriguez was negotiating to sell property he doesn't own, property that belongs to Mr. Fletcher. He was counting on this guardianship petition to give him legal access to make that sale." Kimberly made a small sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. She was staring at the photographs like she'd never seen them before. Maybe Derek hadn't told her about all the meetings. Maybe she was only now realizing how deep his scheming went. "But wait," Martinez said, and there was something almost theatrical about his timing now. "There's more. Exhibit 4 is an audio recording of a conversation between Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Rodriguez, recorded legally under Texas one-party consent law. In this recording, Mr. Rodriguez lays out his entire plan." Martinez played the recording. Derek's voice filled the courtroom, clear and damning. "We could clear $2.3 million easy. Maybe more if we timed the market right. You'd be taken care of, don't worry. We'd make sure you have enough for your needs. Oh, I don't know. Maybe $50,000. That should last you. And you'd move into a nice assisted living facility." The recording continued, Derek's voice animated and excited, describing how he'd sell the cattle, subdivide the land, pocket the profits. Every word was another nail in his coffin. When it ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Derek's hands were shaking. I could see it from where I sat, the way his fingers trembled against the table, the way he kept clenching and unclenching his fists. His breathing had gone shallow and rapid. Kimberly had tears running down her face, but these weren't the theatrical tears from her testimony. These were real, born of panic and the sudden realization that everything was falling apart. Judge Thornton's expression had gone from professional neutrality to something much colder. She looked at Derek like she was seeing something distasteful. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "did you attempt to forge a power of attorney document?" Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out at first. Then, that's not... It's a misunderstanding. Did you meet with a real estate developer to discuss selling property that belongs to Mr. Fletcher? Your Honor, I was just exploring options in case you successfully took control of his assets through this guardianship petition. Judge Thornton's voice could have frozen fire. "Mr. Simmons, did you know about any of this when you filed this petition?" Simmons looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Your Honor, my client assured me that..." "Your client appears to have lied to you, Counselor, and to this court." She turned back to Derek. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm looking at a pattern of behavior that suggests this petition has nothing to do with concern for Mr. Fletcher's well-being and everything to do with attempting to gain control of valuable property through legal manipulation." Derek tried to respond, but Judge Thornton held up her hand. "I'm not finished. Mr. Martinez, is there anything else?" Martinez smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Yes, Your Honor. One more thing. The most important thing, actually." He pulled out a final folder, official documents with the county clerk's seal. 3 months ago, Mr. Fletcher established a revocable living trust. Every asset he owns, the ranch, his vehicles, his bank accounts, his investments, all of it has been transferred into this trust. Mr. Fletcher serves as grantor, trustee, and lifetime beneficiary. He maintains complete control over all his assets during his lifetime. He paused, letting the implications settle in. Upon Mr. Fletcher's death, all assets transfer to the designated beneficiary, the Hill Country Animal Rescue Foundation, not to family, not to Mr. Rodriguez, not to anyone who might have been hoping for an inheritance. Derek's face went from pale to something worse, a kind of grayish-green that suggested he might actually be sick. His mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Kimberly let out a sound that might have been a sob, or might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell which. "Your Honor," Martinez continued, "even if this court were to grant Mr. Rodriguez guardianship, which we strenuously oppose, he would gain control over exactly nothing. The trust is irrevocable regarding beneficiaries. It's properly documented, legally sound, and completely outside the reach of any guardianship order. Mr. Rodriguez has spent months scheming to steal property that he can never, ever touch." The transformation in Derek was complete. The confident man who'd walked into the courtroom was gone. In his place sat someone who looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His hands were flat on the table now, pressing down hard like he needed something to hold on to. His face had a sheen of sweat despite the air conditioning. His eyes darted from the judge to Simmons, to the photographs to me, desperate and panicked. Kimberly was crying openly now, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks down her face. She kept shaking her head, tiny movements like she was trying to deny reality itself. Judge Thornton studied the trust documents for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up, and her expression was absolutely glacial. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need to be very clear about something. What you've done here is not just unethical. It appears to be criminal. You forged legal documents. You made false statements to obtain guardianship. You attempted to defraud Mr. Fletcher of his property. You suborned perjury from witnesses." Derek tried to speak. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Her voice cracked like a whip. I'm denying this petition in its entirety. Mr. Fletcher is clearly competent to manage his own affairs. But more than that, I am referring the evidence in this case to the Gillespie County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. What happened here today is fraud, Mr. Rodriguez, and in Texas, that carries serious consequences. The courtroom erupted. Simmons was on his feet, trying to salvage something, anything. Derek looked like he was about to pass out. Kimberly had her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I sat there, watching it all unfold, and felt something settle inside me. Not satisfaction exactly. It was too sad for that. Watching my daughter realize what she'd done, watching her husband's scheme collapse. But justice. Cold, absolute justice. Derek's eyes found mine across the courtroom. In them I saw the moment of realization, the understanding that he'd underestimated me completely, that he'd brought a knife to a gunfight, that he'd tried to con someone who knew the law better than he ever would. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just held his gaze steadily, letting him see that I'd known every move he was making, that I'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time, that this outcome wasn't luck, it was inevitable. Judge Thornton banged her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Bailiff, please ensure the case materials are forwarded to the DA's office by the end of today. Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Simmons, I strongly suggest you consult with Criminal Defense Counsel immediately. Derek stood on shaking legs. He looked at Kimberly, at me, at the judge, as if someone might suddenly announce this was all a mistake. But no one did. This was real. This was happening. And watching them walk out of that courtroom, Derek stumbling slightly, Kimberly sobbing, both of them destroyed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I was finally home on my own land again. But we weren't quite done yet. Judge Thornton was gathering her papers, preparing to leave the bench when Derek stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet courtroom. This is ridiculous. His voice came out too loud, edged with desperation. You can't just... This whole thing is he's manipulating everyone. Judge Thornton's head snapped up. Her eyes went cold. Mr. Rodriguez, sit down. No, you don't understand. That old man... Derek pointed at me, his hand shaking. He's been playing games, pretending to be confused, setting me up. He planned this whole thing. Mr. Rodriguez... Simmons tried to grab his arm, but Derek shook him off. I'm the victim here. He let me think. He made me believe. Derek was losing coherence, the words tumbling out faster. Finally, your ranch and your truck belong to me, you worthless old man. I earned this. 5 years living in that guest house, dealing with his stubbornness, his refusal to see reason. This property should be mine. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing, her hands frozen over the keys. Derek had just said, out loud, in open court, exactly what this was really about. Judge Thornton stood slowly. When she spoke, her voice could have cut steel. Mr. Rodriguez, did you just admit that you filed this guardianship petition to gain control of Mr. Fletcher's property? That this was never about his well-being? Derek seemed to realize what he'd done. His mouth opened and closed. No, that's not... I meant... Bailiff, Judge Thornton said quietly. The bailiff moved toward Derek immediately. Mr. Rodriguez, you are in contempt of this court. Furthermore, your outburst has provided additional evidence of fraud. I'm ordering you detained pending investigation by the district attorney. You can't do this. Derek's voice went high and panicked. I have rights. This is... Simmons, do something. Simmons looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, my client is obviously distraught. Your client just confessed in open court to attempting fraud. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Rodriguez to holding. The bailiff approached Derek, hand on his cuffs. Derek backed away, knocking his chair over. No. This isn't happening. This can't be. Mr. Rodriguez, don't make this worse, the bailiff said calmly. He was a big man, probably ex-military, and his presence alone seemed to deflate Derek's resistance. Derek's eyes found mine again. The panic there was almost pathetic. This wasn't how his plan was supposed to go. He'd walked into this courtroom expecting to walk out with my life's work. Instead, he was being led away in handcuffs while I sat there. perfectly calm, perfectly collected. "You set me up," he said, voice breaking. "You knew all along. You planned this." I met his gaze steadily. "I protected myself from theft. There's a difference." The bailiff cuffed Derek's hands behind his back. The metal clicking into place had a finality to it. Derek's expensive suit looked ridiculous now, wrinkled and sweat-stained. His hair, so carefully styled this morning, had fallen into his face. He looked small suddenly, despite his height. Small and defeated. Kimberly sat frozen in her seat, mascara streaking down her face in dark rivers. She wasn't crying anymore. She'd moved past tears into some kind of shocked paralysis. She kept staring at Derek being led away, then at me, then back at Derek, like her brain couldn't process what was happening. "Miss Fletcher," Judge Thornton said, and my daughter flinched at the sound of her name. "You're not being detained at this time, but I strongly advise you to remain available for questioning. The DA may have questions about your role in this matter." Kimberly nodded mechanically. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She grabbed the table for support, knocking over a water glass. The sound of it shattering seemed to snap her back to reality. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. Her father, the man she'd testified against, the man she'd tried to steal from, had just destroyed her husband's freedom, and quite possibly her own future. "Dad," she whispered. "Dad, I thought—" I stood, gathering my papers. Martinez touched my arm lightly, a silent question. I shook my head. I had nothing to say to her. Not now, maybe not ever. We walked out of the courtroom into the corridor, leaving Kimberly sitting alone among the wreckage of her choices. The heavy doors closed behind us with a solid thunk. Martinez let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. Derek's outburst just saved the DA a lot of work. He basically confessed to fraud on the record. What happens now? The DA's office will investigate. They'll look at the forged documents, the false witness statements, the recordings. Given what we presented today in Derek's courtroom confession, I'd expect formal charges within a week. Fraud, forgery, attempted theft by deception. He's looking at serious time. We stood there in the courthouse corridor, lawyers and clerks moving past us, the normal business of justice continuing around us. Through the window, I could see the town square, the old limestone buildings of Fredericksburg baking in the afternoon sun. This was my town, my home, and I'd just successfully defended it against someone who'd tried to take it from me. "What about Kimberly?" I asked quietly. Martinez considered. Harder to prove criminal intent on her part. She gave false testimony, but Derek's lawyer could argue she genuinely believed what she was saying, that Derek manipulated her too. The DA might not pursue charges against her, but civilly, he trailed off meaningfully, "I want to file a civil suit against both of them. Emotional distress, legal costs, defamation, whatever we can make stick. I can have papers drawn up by tomorrow. Between Derek's criminal liability and the debt he's probably accumulated preparing for this case, they won't have much to pay you with. I don't care about the money." And I didn't. This wasn't about recovering costs. This was about making sure they understood there were consequences, that you couldn't try to destroy someone's life and walk away without scars. How much can we sue for? Given the emotional distress, the cost of our preparation, the malicious nature of their actions, I'd recommend $87,000. It's substantial enough to hurt, but not so large that a judge will dismiss it as punitive. "Do it." We walked toward the parking lot, the courthouse receding behind us. My truck was parked in the shade of a live oak, the same 1959 Chevrolet Apache I'd been restoring when Derek first confronted me in the barn. That felt like a lifetime ago now, though it had only been a few months. "You should go home," Martinez said. "Get some rest. This was a stressful day, even with the outcome we wanted." I nodded, but I wasn't tired. I felt more awake than I had in months. The weight I'd been carrying, the fear of losing everything, the betrayal, the uncertainty, it had lifted. I'd faced them down and won, not through violence or underhanded tactics, but through the law, through preparation, documentation, and the simple truth that I was exactly who I'd always been, a competent man who knew how to protect what was his. I was about to get in my truck when I saw her. Kimberly had finally made it out of the courthouse. She stood on the steps, looking lost. Her expensive dress was rumpled, her face blotchy from crying. She saw me across the parking lot and started walking toward me. "Dad!" she called out. "Dad, please, I need to talk to you." I could have gotten in the truck, could have driven away without a word. Maybe that would have been kinder. But I waited, let her approach. She deserved to hear what I had to say. She stopped a few feet away, wrapping her arms around herself despite the heat. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Derek said you were really sick, that you needed help, that we were doing the right thing." "Stop." The word came out harder than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "You knew, Kimberly. Maybe not all of it, but you knew. You knew I wasn't confused. You knew I wasn't incapable. You wanted to believe Derek because it gave you what you wanted. Money, freedom, a life in California. So you chose to believe him instead of your own father. That's not fair. You testified against me, under oath. You told a judge I didn't know where I lived, that I talked to people who weren't there. You looked that judge in the eye and lied about your own father." My voice stayed level, cold. "Fair doesn't enter into it, Kimberly. You made your choice." She was crying again, but I felt nothing. The little girl who used to call me Magic was gone. In her place was a stranger who'd tried to steal my life. "I gave you everything," I continued. "Raised you alone after your mother passed. Put you through college, gave you a home when you needed it, and you repaid me by trying to take the one thing I built with my own hands." I paused. Let that sink in. "You chose him over me. You chose money over your father. Now you get to live with that choice." "Please," she whispered, "please don't do this. I'm still your daughter." "No," I said quietly. "My daughter died the day she walked into that courtroom to testify against me. I don't know who you are anymore." I got in my truck and started the engine. Through the window, I could see her standing there crying, reaching toward me like she could pull me back, but I just put the truck in gear and drove away, watching her get smaller in my rearview mirror until she disappeared completely. The drive back to the ranch felt different. The land looked the same. The rolling hills, the live oaks, the limestone outcroppings that gave hill country its name. But something had shifted inside me. I'd protected what was mine. I'd proven I wasn't a victim. I'd shown them exactly what happened when you underestimated someone who knew the law better than you ever would. Derek would go to prison. Kimberly would have to rebuild her life from nothing, and I would go back to my ranch, to my trucks, to my life, exactly as it should be. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always satisfying. It was often sad, sometimes painful, but it was necessary. And it was done. The call from Martinez came 3 days later. I was in the barn working on the Apache's transmission, actually working this time, not pretending, when my phone rang. "The DA filed charges this morning," Martinez said without preamble. "Attempted fraud in the second degree, forgery of a legal document, and subornation of perjury. If Derek's convicted on all counts, he's looking at 18 months to 3 years in prison, plus fines." "That's it? 3 years for trying to steal everything I own?" "Texas sentencing guidelines. These are third-degree felonies." "It's not murder, Orrin, but yes, it's significant time, and the conviction will follow him forever. Good luck getting a job in real estate or any position of financial trust with fraud on your record." "What about the civil suit?" "Filed yesterday. Derek's been served. He's got 30 days to respond, but given that he's in county jail right now with bail set at $75,000, Martinez paused. "He's not making bail, and I'm guessing Kimberly doesn't have that kind of money lying around, not after what they spent preparing for the guardianship case." I felt a grim satisfaction at that. Derek, who'd been so confident in that expensive suit, was sitting in a jail cell because he couldn't afford to buy his way out. There was poetry in that, but the universe wasn't done with consequences yet. That same afternoon, I got a visitor. I saw the car coming up the ranch road, a beat-up Honda that I didn't recognize. When it pulled up to the main house, Kimberly got out. She looked terrible. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She'd lost weight, the kind of weight you lose when stress eats you from the inside out. I stayed on the porch, didn't come down to meet her, made her walk the whole way to me. "Dad," she started, then stopped. Tried again. "I need help." "No." You don't know what I'm going to ask. I don't need to. The answer is no. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Derek's bail is $75,000. I don't have that kind of money. His lawyer says if I can get him out, we can work on his defense. His defense, I repeated flatly, against charges of fraud, forgery, and perjury. Crimes he actually committed. Crimes you helped him commit. I made a mistake. You made a choice, and you're asking me to help fix it by bailing out the man who tried to steal my property? The man who forged my signature? The man who's sitting in jail right now because he confessed to fraud in open court? I shook my head. Not a chance. He's my husband. Then you should have thought about that before you both decided I was an easy mark. Kimberly's expression shifted, something desperate replacing the pleading. Fine. Forget Derek. But I need money. We have debts. Derek hired that lawyer, paid those witnesses, and now I'm responsible for all of it. They're threatening to take the car, to sue me personally. I'm going to lose everything. Good. The word hung in the air between us. Kimberly stared at me like I'd become someone she didn't recognize, which was fair because I was looking at her the same way. How can you say that? I'm your daughter. My daughter wouldn't have testified against me in court. My daughter wouldn't have tried to steal my life's work. You're just someone who shares my blood and made terrible choices. Those choices have consequences. I'll lose everything, she repeated, voice breaking. Yes, I said calmly. You will. Just like you tried to make me lose everything. The difference is you actually deserve it. She tried a different angle, the one I'd been waiting for. What about the ranch? After you're gone, it'll just go to some charity? I'm your only child. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to, but you made it very clear what I meant to you. A paycheck, an inheritance to be collected as soon as possible. So yes, when I die, the Hill Country Animal Rescue Foundation will get this ranch. They'll use it to help animals who can't help themselves. Seems more worthwhile than giving it to someone who'd sell it for cash the day I'm in the ground. You can't do this to me. I already did. The trust is finalized, recorded, and completely legal. You'll never see a penny of this property, Kimberly. Not while I'm alive, and not after I'm dead. She stood there shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was rage or despair or both. I hate you, she finally said, the words coming out choked. I hate you for this. That's your right. But you need to leave my property now. This is my home. No, it's my home. You were a guest who overstayed her welcome. You have 24 hours to get your belongings out of the guest house. After that, I'm having the locks changed, and anything left inside will be disposed of. You can't just kick me out. I can, and I am. This is my property. You're not on the lease. You're not a tenant. And you just admitted in court to committing fraud against me. I'd say that violates any informal arrangement we might have had. So get your things and go. Kimberly looked at the main house, then at the guest house where she'd lived for 5 years. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might force me to actually call the sheriff. But something in my expression must have convinced her I was serious. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out small, broken. That's not my problem anymore. She walked back to her car with her shoulders slumped, moving like someone twice her age. I watched her drive away, dust rising behind the Honda as it headed down the ranch road. When she disappeared from view, I felt something release in my chest. Not satisfaction. It was too sad for that. But finality. That chapter of my life was closed. The next morning, I drove to Martinez's office for an update. He had news, and from his expression, it wasn't what Derek and Kimberly would want to hear. Derek's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, Martinez said. The DA rejected it. They want this to go to trial. They're making an example out of him. Elder fraud is a hot-button issue right now, and this case has everything. Forged documents, fake witnesses, greed. The DA thinks it'll be an easy conviction and good publicity. How long until trial? Could be 6 months, could be a year. Derek will probably sit in county jail the whole time since he can't make bail. His lawyer might try again to get bail reduced, but given that courtroom outburst... Martinez shrugged. Judges don't like it when you have a meltdown in their courtroom. And Kimberly? Still no charges against her. The DA doesn't think they can prove criminal intent. She'll probably be called as a witness at Derek's trial, though. She'll have to testify about the plan, what she knew, when she knew it. He paused. That's not going to be a good day for her. What about our civil suit? That moves forward regardless of the criminal case. Actually, Derek's indictment helps us. The court can take judicial notice of the criminal charges, which means we don't have to prove fraud from scratch. We just have to show damages. With your legal costs, the stress, the damage to your reputation, $87,000 is very reasonable. I nodded, processing it all. Derek would sit in jail for months before facing trial. Kimberly would have to testify against her own husband. Their debts would crush them even if Derek somehow avoided prison time, and I would be made whole, financially at least, through the civil judgment. There's one more thing, Martinez said carefully. The story's getting around town. People talk, especially about courthouse drama. You're going to get attention, people wanting to hear what happened, maybe reporters if this gets picked up by local news. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. For months, I'd been playing a role, pretending to be confused, letting people underestimate me. Now the truth was out. I'd systematically dismantled an attempted theft using nothing but legal documents and careful planning. People would talk. They'd probably take sides. Some might think I was too harsh on my own daughter. But I'd done what I had to do to protect what was mine. And I'd done it legally, cleanly, without breaking a single law. If people wanted to judge me for that, let them. "I'll be fine," I said. "I've got nothing to hide. Everything I did was legal and necessary." "Good, because you're about to become a minor celebrity in Fredericksburg." Old man outsmarts greedy son-in-law. It's the kind of story people love. He was right. Over the next few days, people started approaching me around town, at the feed store, at Porky's BBQ, at the hardware store. Most were supportive, congratulating me on standing up for myself. A few looked at me with something like wariness, like they were wondering if I'd do the same to them if they crossed me. The answer, of course, was yes. If someone tried to steal from me, I'd protect myself. That's not being vindictive, that's being smart. Derek's preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks after his arrest. I didn't attend, but Martinez did, and he called me afterward with the details. Derek pled not guilty, obviously, but the judge found probable cause for all charges. Trial's set for 6 months from now. Derek's still in county. He tried to get bail reduced, but the judge denied it. Said he was a flight risk given the severity of the charges and his demonstrated willingness to commit fraud. 6 more months in jail. 6 more months for Derek to think about what he'd done, about the choice he'd made to try to steal from an old man he'd underestimated. Justice was slow, but it was thorough, and watching it unfold, watching Derek's scheme collapse under the weight of his own greed and stupidity, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. My ranch was mine. My future was secure. And the people who'd tried to take it from me were facing exactly the consequences they'd earned. Sometimes the law worked exactly as it should. Derek's trial lasted 3 days. I attended every session while prosecutors laid out his scheme. The forged documents, fabricated witnesses, secret meetings to sell property he didn't own, recordings of his plan to warehouse me in assisted living while pocketing $2.3 million. On the stand, Derek claimed he was just trying to help. But when they played that recording, his voice cheerfully discussing giving me $50,000 and keeping the rest, the jury's faces said it all. Kimberly testified too. She'd filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier, trying to distance herself from Derek's crimes. Watching her stumble through answers, claiming ignorance while evidence showed otherwise, I felt nothing. She'd made her choices. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek's face drained of color, hands shaking so badly they rattled the table. Sentencing came a week later. Judge Thornton's expression was ice. "Mr. Rodriguez, you attempted to defraud Mr. Fletcher of everything he built. I sentence you to 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, a $15,000 fine, and full restitution." They led Derek away in handcuffs. He didn't look at me. Maybe he finally understood he'd underestimated the wrong person. Martinez met me outside. Civil judgment came through. $87,000. Full amount. Wage garnishment starts once Kimberly finds work. They'll be paying you back for years. Good. Let them spend years watching money disappear from paychecks, remembering what they tried to do. Kimberly's letter arrived 2 days later. San Antonio return address. She'd fled Fredericksburg. I held it briefly, then put it in my desk drawer unopened. Apologies came too late to matter. I'd hired Tom Brennan as ranch manager with two hands to help. The property ran smoother than it had in years. I spent days working on my trucks, writing property lines, making repairs. The Apache was nearly finished, engine purring perfectly. People in town treated me differently. Most were supportive. A few looked uncomfortable with a father who'd cut off his daughter completely. I didn't care. I'd done what was necessary. Sharon from the bank called. "Kimberly's asking for help. Her check bounced." "No. You're harder than you used to be." "I'm exactly as hard as I need to be." The garnishment started the next month. Kimberly found work as an office manager, $32,000 yearly. Court ordered 15% garnished, about $400 monthly. At that rate, 18 years to pay $87,000. 18 years of monthly reminders. I didn't need the money, but I wanted her to pay. Wanted her to feel the weight of betrayal every month for nearly 2 decades. Life settled into rhythm. Dawn property checks with Tom. Porch breakfasts watching sunrise. Afternoons in the barn. Evenings reviewing finances, ensuring everything stayed protected. The living trust remained unchanged. When I died, everything would go to Hill Country Animal Rescue Foundation. They'd create sanctuary for hurt animals. I'd built something good that would continue long after I was gone. Kimberly would get nothing. Not a dollar, not an acre, not a single truck. She'd live knowing her father's legacy went to charity, because she'd proven herself unworthy. That seemed like justice to me. The Apache was finally finished on a clear September morning. 3 years of restoration, every inch perfect. Red paint gleaming, chrome reflecting the sky. I'd taken something broken and made it whole. At the mailbox, another letter from Kimberly waited, the second in 3 months. It joined the first, unopened, in my desk. But there was also a court envelope containing a check for $400, the first garnishment payment. Attached was a schedule showing 215 more payments over 18 years. I pocketed the check, the first of many, the beginning of her long lesson. On the porch with coffee, I surveyed my 847 acres. Every fence post, every pasture, I knew them all. This was what Derek tried to steal and failed. The Apache gleamed in the drive. Tom and his crew worked the north boundary. Everything ran exactly as it should. Derek sat in a Texas prison cell. He'd figured an old man would be easy pickings. Instead, he'd met someone who'd spent 35 years learning law and protection. His greed cost him everything: freedom, marriage, future. Kimberly worked her low-paying job, watching 15% disappear monthly. She'd get that deduction 215 more times, each reminding her she chose wrong, betrayed her father for money she never got. Should I feel guilty? Maybe some fathers would. But they hadn't watched their daughter testify they were incompetent, hadn't heard her laugh when Derek shouted he was taking everything. I'd given Kimberly every chance to choose differently. She could have stopped, said no, refused to testify, remembered I was her father. She made her choices. Now she lived with them. Martinez called, confirming the trust remained perfect. The Animal Rescue Foundation would inherit everything. Documentation ironclad, legally unassailable. Derek and Kimberly fought so hard, yet guaranteed they'd never get a single acre. That evening I took the Apache for its first real drive. Down Ranch Road 2721, windows down, engine rumbling. The truck ran perfectly, 40 years of neglect erased through patient work and attention to detail. Just like the legal case, just like everything worth having. I drove past neighboring ranches, past familiar territory, until I reached empty road, where I could open the throttle. This truck was built in 1959, the year I turned 1. We'd grown up together under Texas sun and hill country life. Now, both restored, both exactly what we meant to be. Returning at sunset, I parked and sat as the engine cooled, watching light fade from the hills. My property, my home, my life, all protected, secure, staying exactly where it belonged. Later on the porch with whiskey, I looked at those 847 acres under stars. Night was quiet, crickets, distant cattle. This was peace, what I'd fought for and won. 2 unopened letters sat in my desk. Maybe someday I'd read them. Maybe I'd forgive her, though I doubted it. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some choices destroy relationships beyond repair. But that was okay. I didn't need her forgiveness or to give mine. I had my ranch, my trucks, my life exactly as wanted, and satisfaction knowing when they tried to take it, I'd beaten them using only law and planning. They thought I was easy because of age, thought an old man would be confused, controllable. Derek said it in court. Finally, your ranch and truck belong to me, you worthless old man. That moment, watching his face when Martinez revealed the trust, was worth everything. I'd shown them what happens when you underestimate someone, when you mistake quiet for weak, age for incompetence. I'd spent 35 years learning law, property rights, asset protection. I knew things they'd never understand, saw moves they never anticipated, playing chess while they thought we played checkers. And I won. Completely. Absolutely. The ranch would outlive me, helping animals needing sanctuary. Derek would emerge as a felon with no prospects. Kimberly would spend 18 years paying while watching inheritance go to charity. I would live out my days here, working trucks, running property, enjoying earned peace. That was justice, fairness, natural consequence of trying to steal from someone who knew better. I finished my whiskey, looking at my land one final time before heading inside. They wanted my ranch and trucks, fought dirty to get them. Learned the hardest lesson. Justice always wins when you're willing to fight for it, not with violence or revenge, but with law, used properly by someone understanding it completely. I'd protected what was mine, defeated those who tried to take it, done it legally, methodically, perfectly. Sometimes being old and quiet was the best disguise. By the time they realized their mistake, it was far too late, and that was satisfying beyond words. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.